There's to be a major reform of the government's de-radicalisation programme known as PREVENT after the publication of a long-awaited report. Conducted by the former Charity Commission Chair William Shawcross and long delayed, the report says the programme is failing to understand Islamist extremism. It doesn't pull its punches. It accuses PREVENT of addressing the personal vulnerabilities of extremists rather than the danger that they pose. PREVENT money, taxpayer money, found its way to organisations that support the Taliban. 7 out of 13 terror attacks over the last 6 years, including the murder of my good friend Sir David Amess MP, were carried out by extremists who had been referred to the inappropriately named PREVENT. The organisation says the report puts too much emphasis on the threat from right-wing extremists at the expense of neglecting the greater danger from Islamist terrorism, partly because of fear of being accused of being racist, anti-Muslim or culturally insensitive. First ordered by the former Home Secretary Priti Patel back in 2019, the report makes 34 recommendations that have all been accepted in full by her successor, Suella Braverman. You have to wonder how things can go so badly wrong. In a moment, we'll speak to Wasiq Wasiq from the Henry Jackson Society. But first, I'm joined by Sir Peter Fahy, former Chief Constable of Manchester Police, and previously the National Police Lead on PREVENT, and Professor Anthony Glees, a security expert at the University of Buckingham. Peter, I asked the question just now, how can things go so badly wrong? You were very strongly connected with PREVENT, I think some time ago. Do you accept that something has gone badly wrong? What is it and why?
I think the problem is, Michael, that the whole issue about de-radicalisation, how you identify people who are potentially dangerous and violent and how you change their mindset is still a very inexact science. Despite now many years of experience and huge amounts of research, really the science is very inexact. I don't think actually this report is very radical. The recommendations are mostly technical, and I don't think it really gets to the heart of the issue. As you say, it's 4 years old. There's been a long delay in it being published, and I think the danger is it's looking backwards as to how things have been. But I think the general issue is this is a very, very difficult issue to operate in. PREVENT has tried to go upstream to deal more and more with ideologies. We got into a big issue about what's the nature of extremism. There was a whole debate about what are British values and not British values. And the danger is, when we do that, we also undermine some of the values that, of course, ISIS themselves are trying to attack. So there's no mistakes, but actually I would also just question that there are some fundamental weaknesses in the approach overall.
Yes, well, it's pretty clear from the report there are fundamental weaknesses in PREVENT. What are the weaknesses you identify in the report? It sounds as though you weren't entirely happy with the report by William Shawcross.
Well, I think it doesn't stand back far enough and actually question the huge amount of resources going into PREVENT when you look at the relatively, thankfully, very small number of people that are actually killed in these terrorist attacks compared to lots of other risks and dangers that we face in society. And I don't think it challenges enough whether it's right to go so far upstream into what people are thinking and how they practice their faith and what their opinions are. Because, as I say, there's a danger that actually achieves the aim that ISIS themselves are trying to achieve. And I think the other weakness, it doesn't go enough into the research, as weak as it is, as to what works and what doesn't work. The fact is, PREVENT depends on referrals from people like families, community members, teachers, youth workers, medical professionals. And unless they have confidence in the programme, and there's no question that a large number don't, then the trouble is that is also a fundamental weakness in the programme, because it does rely on people putting referrals into the system, and really whether they're concentrating on so-called Islamists or right-wing people or whatever it might be, that is just a reflection of the referrals that are being put into the system, as I say, by those who have got concerns about a particular person.
Understood. Let me turn to Anthony. Anthony, what do you make of the criticisms of PREVENT? What do you make of the report?
Well, I think the first thing to accept is that we've got this report by William Shawcross, who, very distinguished figure and former journalist, but I don't think he's really an expert in counter-terrorism policy. But it is a very interesting report. I would say it's a Parsons egg report. There's some very good things. I think he's right to focus on the money that is wasted by having people engaged in de-radicalisation who aren't actually professionals. Some are students, like those Cambridge University students that were responsible, inadvertently, of course, for the Fishmonger Hall attacks. Others are extremists themselves who have eschewed, so they say, violence. So Shawcross is absolutely right to point that out. Where I think he's wrong, though, is to try and turn this into a debate as to whether too much emphasis is placed on Islamism. And I disagree with Sir Peter, of course, very, very distinguished person, on that point. I think Islamism is an extreme danger to us here in the United Kingdom and to others throughout the world. But Shawcross then says too much emphasis is placed on right-wing extremism, and there should be no counter-terrorist activity against incel. These are the people who are intentionally celibate. And people will remember the awful case of, in Plymouth, 5 people killed by a loony but highly dangerous person who wanted to terrorize women. So Shawcross is trying to sell this and to answer the criticism that Prevent is anti-Muslim, which is a wrong view, but put about by Islamist groups in the United Kingdom. In order to counter that, Shawcross is kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The government's prime duty is to deliver security and to try and prevent people from terrorizing other people. And that is Islamist mainly, but not only. There are far-right Nazis and extremists who are a public danger. And there are also these groups like Incel who want to terrorize women. And particularly now, for William Shawcross to say, "Ooh, don't worry about these people," that seems to be absolutely disgraceful. So, good things there, but also some silly things, frankly.
What I found refreshing about William Shawcross was not being an academic, not being an expert, as you say. He was willing to say some things very straightforwardly and very clearly in a way that I think many authors of reports are not willing. So Wasiq Wasiq has been sitting very patiently on my left here. He's from the Henry Jackson Society. What do you make of it all?
Well, I think it's a really important report, and it's reshifted our focus back to why Prevent came into existence in the first place. Since the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, it came into existence from 2003 and then mainstreamed itself in 2005 after the 7/7 bombings that we experienced from homegrown Islamist extremists here from Britain. And I think it's really important that what Shawcross has done is shifted the focus back according to what the data says, or what the data at least doesn't say, in terms of the mismatch between the threat posed by the extreme right wing compared to the threat posed by those who are Islamist extremists. As you said in your opening, there have been Islamist extremists who have been referred to Prevent and then have gone on to carry out terrorist attacks, and that has been a catastrophic failure.
Murders, let's use the word absolutely
yes.
clearly. One of the mismatches, which is demonstrable, is that the focus of the security forces who are thwarting actual plots was very largely towards thwarting Islamist extremist plots, whereas more than a majority of what was being done by Prevent was directed towards right-wing organisations. So there was clearly a difference between what Prevent was doing and what the security forces were doing, who were the ones who were actually stopping terrorist attacks.
Yes, absolutely. And I think when we look back at also the referral rates for extreme right-wing and Islamist extremism, what we find is when they started collecting data for referrals for Islamist extremism, it was over 3,700, whereas for extreme right-wing, it was less than 1,000. But then we saw a massive decline, over 70% decline for Islamist extremism referral rates, whereas for extreme right-wing, the referral rates were inclining. They were increasing a lot. And one of the things that William Shawcross has in my view, correctly analysed. The reason for that is the way that both forms of extremism are being defined. For example, when it comes to extreme right-wing, it's so broad that they're now including people who are normal conservative or right-wing commentators, whereas for Islamist extremism, it's narrowed so much, potentially because there's a fear that you could be accused of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred if you refer someone who happens to be a Muslim to prevent.
Would I be wrong to think that there is a natural tendency within organisations like this to move towards political correctness, to move away from the fundamental reasons for which they are established? And that's an important question, it seems to me, because is there really any hope that the report will bite, that things will change?
Well, I hope so. I think there's a case study, there's a police association who's hoping to now remove the term Islamism and jihadism from counter-terrorism terminology. And that's obviously problematic because we need to be able to call it what it is. And I hope that this report can really push back against that and to refocus our efforts back onto what we're meant to be dealing with rather than being cowed by political correctness. And
Peter Fahy, if I may just ask you, because you're the one who has the most acquaintanceship with the organisation, just very briefly, could you tell us, do you think it's likely that the report will bring changes at Prevent?
I myself am not sure that it will, because Prevent has got to be driven about what is the latest threat, harm and risk. You know, what is the current security picture? And I think a lot of the police officers, and Prevent is part of the anti-terrorism effort, they will be driven by, number one, absolutely what are the referrals coming from local people, from the agencies and the communities, but they will be specifically driven by what is the risk that they see, who are the most dangerous people. And the key thing really for Prevent is to concentrate on those people who are likely to transfer their ideology into violent action. That is where it started from, and that's what it should go back to.
Many thanks to you, Sir Peter Fahy, to Wasiq Wasiq here in the studio, and to Professor Anthony Glees.